Hello, I'm Claire Dowling. Welcome to episode 1 of the Keep Streets Live podcast, where I've interviewed David Fisher, singer, songwriter, and busker. Thank you, David Fisher, for joining me on the Keep Streets Live podcast.
It's good to be here.
I'd first like to ask you about your album, Busking Beyond Borders. Can you tell me what inspired you to write that album?
I spent about 3.5 years just traveling and busking my way around Europe. It started off as just I planned to leave for a few months, and then it sort of got a bit out of hand. And I just sort of saw no reason to stop really. And I was writing a few songs as I was going, as I tend to. I tend to write a new song every couple of months, every few months or so.
Right.
And I gradually realised that I had enough songs that were sort of with a basis in something to do with my travels for a whole album. And so I thought it'd be nice to do a whole album with a central theme through it. And as well, I sort of I'd had a few people who suggested to me that I should write a book about my experiences of busking and traveling. And I thought, well, this is ideal to tie the album in with a book. And so you got the stories behind the songs you can find somewhere in the book as well, which has the same name. So I thought it'd be a nice project to sort of tie in with each other.
That's a wonderful idea. And I've just been reading your website, davidfishermusician.com.
That's right, yes.
And you've got a lovely write-up there about the album, and we can listen to the album as well. I've been listening to some of the tracks on Bandcamp. Very good.
Yeah.
Well done. I love the sound. It's a folk, and your voice is beautiful.
Thank you very much.
I really like your lyrics as well. And what a great idea to tie it in with the book. So your stories about Europe, traveling around busking, it's an amazing project. And I did read a snippet from your book. You've been to many different countries in Europe.
Yes, I'm a bit of a spreadsheet man, so I do have an exact tally, and it's currently up at I think nearly 300 cities in 46 countries at the moment.
That's incredible. That's amazing.
Yeah, yes, it's something that motivates me to try and keep getting those numbers up. I have to look at that and think that that's not bad, and then I see a post from someone who I know Chester Bingley, who's I think he's nearly up at 1,000 cities now that he's busked in.
Wow.
As far as I know, so I've still got a way to go to compete with that sort of thing. But
and it's so positive that the busking has enabled you to do that as well, to travel and write about experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was so for me, it was a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, I was working as a busker back in England before I went traveling for about 4 years.
Yeah.
And I was perfectly happy, but I just sort of thought, well, there's no obvious reason for me to just stay living in England. So why don't I just head off and see what happens, see if I can sustain myself. And it turns out that it is possible.
A great idea, and congratulations on
thank you.
on doing that. One thing I wanted to chat to you about is, did you have any experiences of dealing with authorities when you were over in Europe?
Oh, there were plenty, yes. And part of the problem when I'm traveling is that I don't really know the law in individual countries. It took me a long time to really get to grips with the details of busking law in Britain. And when you're moving around this much, it's I find it in other countries it's quite difficult to work out exactly what it is. I didn't have as much of a leg to stand on when it came to things like standing my ground, but there were a couple of times when I was given on-the-spot fines, once in Italy and once in the Czech Republic, which is never nice, but both of those times when it happened, the entire fine was paid for by locals who saw it happen.
Oh, wow.
And really disagreed with it, which I thought was rather wonderful. I mean, particularly in Monza when this happened. I mean, it was in Prague. It was one person who just came up to me and gave me all the money for the fine, which was very kind. In Monza, it was just a whole group of people suddenly overheard what was happening, and they all just started chucking coins in the case. And at the point when I realised, actually, I've got enough to pay the fine now, I told them, thank you, but I have enough now, so you can stop. And they just carried on putting money in. I think I made 3 times the amount of the fine just from angry people who didn't like the police. It was great.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a lovely moment. And then, although I'd say the country where they were strictest in terms of the police was on busking was Azerbaijan, and I couldn't go more than 10 minutes without being moved on by the police. And this is particularly the case given that I have I have a belt to keep all my various harmonicas in, and
Hmm.
if you don't know what a harmonica belt is, then it does look like a bit of a security breach. It does look like you got a bomb strapped to you or something like
Oh
that.
my
So they
gosh, yeah.
got a bit panicky about that, and it's a bit of a standoff where I didn't really want to touch the belt to show them what and produce a
Yeah,
harmonica to show them what it was. So I was, hands in, had my hands in the air
gosh.
and wasn't quite sure what to do. But we sorted it out eventually, and I left the country fairly swiftish.
Yeah, well done. That must have been quite scary. Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah, well, it was just sort of this sense of slight frustration. I mean, my command of the Azerbaijani language is not brilliant. It has to be said,
Yeah.
and so I couldn't really get my get my point across. That it's just a harmonica, um, but
What, what, where was some of your favorite places to busk in Europe, would you say?
um, I mean, but I love Romania. Busking in
Hmm.
Romania was fantastic, and I think pretty much every city, aside from Bucharest, because capital cities and big cities are never particularly good for me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
do you find the same thing?
Yeah, Edinburgh, London, I've never really had a good busking
Yeah,
experience.
yeah,
Just very busy, very expensive, and
yes.
difficult to get a spot because obviously lots of buskers go to those places. And Amsterdam as well, we tried to do a bit of busking there, and it was just overrun with other
Oh
street
yeah.
entertainers. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your letter to Coventry City
Oh yeah.
Council. Well done on the letter. Buskers can find the letter on the Keep Streets Live website as a template under the resources section. What inspired you to write that letter to Coventry?
Well, I used to busk in Coventry quite regularly before I left the country.
Hmm.
I moved back to Britain in around about October time, and it was one of the things I really wanted to do was get more involved in in the buskers' rights side of things.
Yeah, that's
So it's
great.
something I've been following for a while, but I
Yeah.
was feeling slightly guilty for the fact that I hadn't really done anything to get involved in this. And I
Mhm.
saw just on one of the buskers' Facebook groups that Coventry was one of the councils that had passed a public space protection order
Yeah.
against busking,
Mhm.
and I thought, I hadn't heard anything about this, and I asked Keep Streets Live and Musicians Union
Mhm.
if they'd been notified, and they hadn't at all. And I've got the direct quote from the Home Office guidance here, which does state that councils must consult the police and community representatives to
Mhm.
ensure specific groups have the opportunity to comment, including those involved in activities such as busking. And in their response, they admitted that they hadn't contacted any groups with in relation to busking. And when it comes to the Home Office guidance on how to challenge PSPOs, they do
Yeah.
state the interested person could argue that one of the requirements, e.g., consultation, had not been complied with. So this is the angle I'm going for.
Yeah.
Um, I believe that in a very obvious breach of the Home Office guidance on how to introduce a PSPO. So hopefully we'll be able to negotiate overturning that aspect of it.
Yes, and a positive thing has come from that letter. Coventry are wanting to talk. I believe they're wanting to talk to Keep Streets Live about that. So you've opened up a dialogue there, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they said that they're looking for that they'll be arranging a meeting in about 3 or 4 months' time, so we can discuss that.
It's good.
So yeah, it is positive, and hopefully something will come of that because and I think the general system that's in place at the moment or the system that Keep Streets Live are advocating is one of a set of reasonable voluntary guidelines, which to
Hmm.
me seems so much better than using the sort of legislative sledgehammer to crack a nut, because
Absolutely.
you end up punishing. I think it's very difficult to create legislation that doesn't end up punishing responsible buskers.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so much better if buskers work with local businesses, and
Mhm.
we talk to them that if they they feel that someone's been outside their shop or their business for an unreasonable amount of time, then the best thing to do is just open up a dialogue there and talk to each other about it. And
Yeah.
then usually, I've never been in a case where that's led to anything negative, and most buskers and most businesses I speak to say the same thing. So hopefully that approach will work in Coventry.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason why they introduced this PSPO was because they didn't consult anyone. If they had done, I think they would have realised that that's the best way to go about things. So hopefully we can convince them of that when we meet them in a few weeks, in a few
Ye-
months.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And another thing I noted as well was that you sent a letter to the Home Office for
Mm.
a freedom of information request to find
Yes.
out how many PSPOs had been issued against buskers.
Yes.
And they got back to you saying that they don't keep a record of that.
Yes, which I think is absolutely astonishing.
Yeah, and worrying as well.
Sorry?
It's very worrying as a busker.
Yes, yeah, very worrying. Because if you've got no central oversight at all over this sort of thing, and having spoken to councillors in the past about this sort of thing, it's well, I was speaking to this conversation with a councillor in Birmingham where something was proposed a while ago, and in the end there was negotiations, and again these voluntary guidelines were put in place instead, which was a really good result. But there was one of the councillors who was just saying, well, if one person makes a complaint and one councillor starts to push this sort of thing, then it can sort of spiral out of control if no one stops that train in motion from going ahead.
That's
So
right.
if there's no oversight at all in terms of the Home Office point of view, then that's really concerning, I think. And
Yeah.
the fact that if a council introduces a PSPO, the only way to appeal that, you have to appeal within 6 weeks. And now, well,
Yeah.
if you've got a situation such as the Coventry one, where I believe there wasn't a proper consultation process, and no one really noticed they'd passed it until after that 6 weeks, then what do you do? And if the Home Office haven't got oversight, then I think that's a real problem.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I have asked for I've emailed them back, and that there's a sort of appeals process to the freedom of information request, and so I've asked for an independent review of their response to my request, and so we'll see what comes of that.
Well, that's great. Thanks for doing that. On behalf of buskers, just thank you so much for doing that, because the public space protection orders are worrying.
Yeah.
I'll do my best myself to write to my councillor, and I guess write to local MPs that are in areas where they're bringing in these PSPOs to include busking as well. I think that might be a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been following your battles with the law up in it's Carlisle, isn't it? That you've
Yeah.
Is that right? Yes. I mean, that's and good on you for arguing your case really, really well there.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's just important to talk to them and keep the dialogues going. Definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
Is there anything else you'd like to chat about on the podcast about the busking busking laws and stuff in the UK at the moment with the public space protection orders? Or I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we covered a fair bit, but I think the main problem, I think, is that it's when you start talking about it to people who it's not affecting, it sounds very, very dry, and quite dull. And I think that because it gets very legalistic, and I think so I think people sort of lose interest in it. And I don't know whether it's too sort of it sounds a bit conspiratorial to suggest that was sort of almost deliberate on the part of the Home Office, but I don't think that's beyond the bounds of possibility. That because I think the way this law is being used is I think it's arguably one of the most authoritarian pieces of legislation that's come in recent times. But no one's really noticing it, and no one's really talking about it. And if the Home Office is saying, "Oh, well, it's nothing to do with us because it's the individual councils and we don't have any control over it," then I think that's a really, really, really concerning for the future. Yeah, they've been in place the law came in 5 years ago, and in 5 years we've already seen people being banned from swearing in certain areas. We've seen rough sleepers being moved on and fined money for sleeping outside.
Yeah.
And you think this is a really, really concerning state of affairs. So as much as it's important to challenge individual councils on a local level, it feels like you're sort of just pushing it back against the tide, and it feels like there needs to be some sort of change in the law on a national level, to prevent councils from implementing unreasonable laws on these grounds.
Absolutely, I agree. Would you like to sing us a song then?
I would, yes.
That would be amazing.
That'd be lovely. I will just get my guitar ready. Here we go. So this is a song from the album. It's called "People Say." And you can get this album on Bandcamp and Spotify and Amazon and all the rest of it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
People say to make your house a home, plant your roots in the earth and stay till you're old. People say to make your house a home, but I don't see things this way. Not even when these people say I want to travel the world and that can be my home. People say to get a 9-to-5, get something for yourself, that's the goal. People say to get a 9-to-5, but I don't see things this way. Not even when these people say I want to play in the streets and see the smiles on the faces. Success is waiting gold, and the strivers will work every hour they're told. People say success is waiting gold, but I don't see things this way. Not even when these people say, a wise man once said, success is doing what you love. People say you have to settle down, take yourself off the shelf and stop shopping around. People say you have to settle down, but I don't see things this way. Not even when these people say I'm not looking for love, but if I find it, well, that's okay. I'm not looking for love, but if I find it, well, that's okay.
That was wonderful. Thank you, David.
Oh, well, thank you.
The lovely song, People Say. Do you have any gigs coming up in your area at the moment?
I do, yes. Let me think. When are they? I've got a few coming up in the week of the week just leading up to St. Patrick's Day, because I've got a fair amount of Irish folk in the repertoire. So there's one in
fantastic.
Solihull and one in King's Heath, and then a couple in Germany at the start of May. In Bonn.
Great.
So I'm back on the road again for a few weeks at least, and then I've got a couple of festivals coming up. One in Hay and I believe one in Butte over the summer. So all the gigs are on my website.
Fantastic. Your website, davidfishermusician.com.
That's right, yes.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for taking part in this interview for the Keep Streets Live podcast, David.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.